This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review with your NFL Divisional Playoff Weekend Preview. 8 teams remaining in the chase for the Vince Lombardi Trophy. 4 will advance this weekend. We're going to discuss and try to figure out who those teams are. Let's start with the first one, Seattle Atlanta NFC Divisional Playoff, Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Atlanta currently 5-point home favorite, total around 51.5 for this football game. Hey, what can you say about Atlanta offensively? Fantastic. Matt Ryan had a tremendous season. Atlanta offensively put up 33.8 points per game, 415 total yards per game, dominant for much of the season. Weapons galore. Devonta, Freeman, Tevin, Coleman in the backfield at running back. At wide receiver, Julio Jones. How about the way Gabriel came on late in the season? Just tons of weapons everywhere for this Atlanta team. Playing host now to a Seattle defense that, obviously not quite as good as maybe they've been in the past, particularly in the secondary. Now the question becomes, I talked about the Earl Thomas injury last week when they played Detroit. How significant it would be, how significant it could be in that game. Now, Detroit couldn't exploit it because, to be honest, not that they didn't exploit it or that the secondary truly stepped up for Seattle. Matt Stafford didn't have the time to find his receivers. That offensive line was just ripped apart by Seattle at the point of attack. Matt Stafford was under pressure all game last week. He was without his starting center. He was without his right tackle. Riley Reif didn't play either for the Lions in that game. And Seattle's defensive front just teed off throughout that football game on Detroit. So the question becomes, was that secondary really that good last week for Seattle, or was it just a fact that there was no time provided for Matt Stafford to throw the football, find those receivers, and maybe target that Seattle secondary that I think is weaker without Earl Thomas? Again, I think if Atlanta can pass protect here for Matt Ryan, do a better job with that, I think they're going to give themselves a chance to exploit that I still think there are holes in that Seattle secondary without Earl Thomas there. It's not that same lockdown Legion of Boom defense that Richard Sherman kept on screaming about years ago after they beat San Francisco in the NFC Championship game. So I think there are some weaknesses there. I think Atlanta can exploit them. But the problem is, what did we see from Seattle last week? We saw them run the football for the first time in a long time. Running the football had been an issue for the Seahawks. Well, they got it going with Thomas Rawls last week, and I can tell you this right now. They're going to probably commit to the run once again this week because Atlanta has proven to be a little bit soft on run defense, a little bit pushed around when the offensive line gets to come off their blocks and run blocking. That's sometimes where Atlanta gets mauled a little bit. So I think Seattle might be able to move the ball a little bit here themselves in this football game as well. Russell Wilson is as healthy as he's been all season. In fact, he was toiling before last week's game with getting rid of that knee brace, just going without it because he feels that strong, that powerful again on his feet. So good news for Seattle there. A little weak at receiver, Seattle. Doug Baldwin, Javon Curse, and then there's a drop-off. Of course, they missed Tyler Lockett, too. That's an impact injury for that Seattle team. But still, a lot of weapons, and the jury is still out on how good Atlanta's defense is. Atlanta's defense got better down the stretch, there's no question, but they were still not a shutdown, lockdown defense by any stretch of the imagination. I think having Vic Beasley healthy for this game, he is going to play the pass-rushing linebacker for the Falcons. Boy, did he play well late in the season, able to get pressure on opposing quarterbacks. That is big for Atlanta's defense. We'll see if they're able to make good use of it and be able to sort of negate Seattle and their offensive attack, maybe get some pressure of their own on Russell Wilson, but it's a dilemma game for me. I think Atlanta is the better team. I do not trust Seattle on the road this season. I don't know. I know they've been good in the past in the playoffs and even on the road, but they didn't play well on the road last year. Don't forget Tampa Bay, they lost on the road. They got pummeled in Green Bay on the road. So there's some question marks about if Seattle can go on the road here to the Georgia Dome and win this game. I don't want to lay 5 with Atlanta. Maybe you put Atlanta in a money line parlay. That would be my, suggestion with this game. I still don't want to lay 5, though, because you got the back door open. I still have questions about Atlanta's defense and the experience factor. Seattle has much more playoff experience than Atlanta top to bottom. Atlanta Falcon teams in the playoffs, the last 5, all with Matt Ryan at quarterback. Now, granted, you had different players, different coaches, different coordinators for all those other playoff games Atlanta was in, but with Matt Ryan at quarterback in the playoffs for Atlanta, 1-4 straight up, 0-5 against the spread. That's a concern. The one win did come against Seattle here at the Georgia Dome a few years ago, 30-28. But 30-28 ain't going to cover this number for you. 30-28 is going to give Seattle the money if Atlanta wins by that kind of margin. So again, I don't want to lay 5 with the Falcons here. Over the total is probably the best bet in this game if I had to pick one. 51.5. I do think indoors weather won't be an issue. I think both offenses have a little bit of an edge here. And 8-0 to the over, Atlanta. At home during the regular season. Every single game inside this building at the Georgia Dome flew over the total. Maybe this one does as well. All right, let's go to Houston, New England. I'm keeping this AFC divisional breakdown brief. I will not lay 15 with New England. No way. I think this is an overvalued team. We're going to talk about it if they advance next week in the championship round. If New England gets there next week, I'm going to give you some good stats, good recap of the opposing quarterbacks and offenses that the New England defense has had to face this year. And if you go down the list of who the Patriots defense has faced in terms of opposition offenses and quarterbacks, boy, I'll tell you what, they've lived a charmed life. I mean, they have faced basically Russell Wilson and Joe Flacco. They faced one really good quarterback and one decent quarterback, Joe Flacco. That's about it. Every other quarterback to me was a disaster, or at least mediocre at best. Now we're going to start to see them getting tested, especially if they advance past Houston, which I do think they will, when they play a Pittsburgh or Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. Now we're going to find out how good this New England defense is, because I think they benefited a lot from a weak schedule, a weakness in terms of the opposing quarterbacks and offenses that they faced during the regular season. Let's see what they do now in the playoffs. The problem is their defense going to be tested here? I know Brock Osweiler took major steps forward with his play against Oakland, but that was an Oakland team that, again, the defense was not great this season, let's be honest. The defense, or the offense, couldn't move the ball at all for Oakland, so that defense got tired late in the game. Brock made great throws, no question. He made some of the best throws he's made all season in that game to beat Oakland, but that was at home. A little bit of a disheveled Raiders team with Derek Carr out. They were never quite the same mentally and emotionally. I think that was pretty clear. Now you got to go on the road in Foxborough, take on this powerhouse Patriots team, and you got to put up points and make plays if you're Brock Osweiler to give your team any sort of chance in this game. That's the question mark. Can he do that? He was competent last week, 14-25, 168, no big mistakes, very, very good, but now can you do it on the road? And the problem I have with backing Houston, I know this is actually the better team defensively, statistically in this game, Houston, for sure. But they struggle to stop New England's offense in the past. Tom Brady has been able to move it against Houston's defense in the past. Houston defenses that were at least as good as this one. And you look at the recent series history since 2013 when Houston's made the trip to Foxborough to take on this Patriots team. Ugly. 0-3 straight up. 0-3 against the spread. 22.6 margin of defeat. Average margin of defeat, 22.6 points per game. Well, guess what? A loss by 22.6 points is not going to cover a number here for Houston. So, again, it's too many to lay with New England, especially when Houston's the better defensive team statistically. I just can't trust the Texans here. I just can't. How many times have we seen them go up to New England and get their doors blown off? That's the concern. I don't have faith in Osweiler doing it 2 weeks in a row, and now especially against a much better football team on the road in a tough environment. So it's a clear pass for me in this game. It's probably the same from a total perspective. I don't know if Houston's going to be able to put up points. New England might, but don't want to bet it over, but not necessarily sure I want to go under the total either. So let's go on to Sunday. Pittsburgh, Kansas City, AFC Divisional Playoff. Kansas City in that short 1.5, 2-point favorite range at home, total 43.5. And yes, I know Andy Reid off the bye. Everyone's going to be mentioning that stat. I'm sick of hearing about it, to be honest with you, but it has to be mentioned. 19-2 straight up in his career after a bye week. That includes a perfect 3-0 straight up mark after the bye, going into the divisional playoff round when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles as their head coach many years ago, back in the Donovan McNabb era. So great stats for Andy Reid off the bye. That's a concern, there's no question. But the way I'm looking at this game, I still think top to bottom roster-wise, Pittsburgh's the better team here. I really do believe that. I really do. And Pittsburgh, to me, is peaking at the right time. They've played great football late in the regular season. Tremendous dominant win against Miami. Very impressive. And I think this defense is the real story. We know with Ben and with Le'Veon Bell and with Antonio Brown and even the tight ends have made a decent impact on this team. Jesse James for the Steelers, but we know the offense can put up points. It's a great offense, but the defensive improvement on this Steelers team hasn't been talked about enough. How about the impact Bud Dupree has made at linebacker? Bud Dupree, to me, since he's become a regular on this Steelers defense, that's when this defense started to take off. He's been fantastic. He's helped keep the old man, James Harrison, healthy. Down the stretch, they limited his reps to keep him fresh late in the season, and boy, is it paying dividends, that thought process. Let's ease up on James Harrison's usage early in the season so that he's fresh and raring to go and fly into the football late in the season, and that's what we're seeing from James Harrison. The way he's playing at his age is absolutely incredible right now. He's been fantastic. Lawrence Timmons, I mean, just go on down the list. There's a ton of playmakers up front on that Pittsburgh defense right now getting the job done for this Steelers team. Secondary, there's still some concern there a little bit. It's not a great lockdown secondary that Pittsburgh has by any stretch, but they're getting the job done. At Kansas City, to me, this mystique about Arrowhead. You know the last time Kansas City won a home playoff game, Joe Montana was their quarterback. Joe Montana, that was like 20 years ago, back in the 90s. I think Marty Schottenheimer was the coach of the team back then. That's how long ago it was since Kansas City last won a home playoff game. They're 3-8 against the spread, their last 11 games at Arrowhead Stadium. So all this ballyhoo and mystique about, Arrowhead Stadium, tough place to win. Well, no. Tennessee won there. Tampa Bay won there. Jacksonville almost won there. Jacksonville almost won there. I mean, it was a 5-point game or within one score in that game when they went to Kansas City during the regular season. One concern I do have is that I do like what Kansas City's done offensively, putting Tyreek Hill in there. He's been a difference maker. But the real concern I have for Kansas City, I don't sell them short. Listen, it's divisional playoff weekend, okay? There are 8 good teams left. If you are betting these games, and you're betting against one team and any team in one of these games, you're betting against a very good football team at this stage of the season. And there are no clear bet on versus bet against teams at this stage of the season. It's just which team am I willing to make a little bit of a stronger case for than the other. That's really what this boils down to. That's why if you're betting division or playoff NFL football, you don't all of a sudden jack up your unit size from what you did during the regular season. You keep your units the same. This is not the time to be unloading your bankroll on all of these football games. Keep your money management and discipline intact like you did during the regular season, because really that's what it's about. These 4 games and every playoff game, you're just looking to make a slightly stronger case for one team over the other as your bet on team. There's no bet on versus bet against here at this time of year. You're betting against a good football team. Even Houston, if you're betting against them this weekend, you're betting against at least a good football team at this stage. So keep that in mind. For this game, we're going to come back to it for play of the day, or not for play of the day, for video best bet, divisional playoff best bet at the end of this video. If you watched last week's video, it's the same team. You probably know where I'm going already. We'll get back to that at the end. Let's wrap it up now with Green Bay Dallas. This could be the best game of the divisional round on paper. I think it's the most fascinating, that's for sure. The Dallas Cowboys were a torrid ATS team early in the season. Then at the end, the number caught up with them. They finished the season 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games. And no team was hotter down the stretch than Green Bay. I mean, just fantastic. 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 games, 7 straight wins, 19 touchdowns, no interceptions for Aaron Rodgers during that stretch. What a performance last Sunday against the Giants. It took them a while to get going, but once they hit that Hail Mary pass at the end of the first half, they took off from there. And that was against a very good Giants defense, second ranked in a lot of key statistical categories overall. Dallas, not the same defense. So if Green Bay moved the ball well against the G-men, they should be able to move it here against Dallas. I still think there's holes on this Dallas defense. I know Sean Lee, great linebacker. You got to watch out for him. Seems to have a nose for the football. Always ends up in the play making a play or in on the tackle on a lot of these plays for that Dallas defense. Obviously, we know about the Jordy Nelson rib injury. Actually, just minutes before I started this recording, it was made official he's not going to play due to that rib injury. It's a concern. I don't like the fact he's not playing, but what I am encouraged by for Green Bay is Randall Cobb's back, had a huge game, 3 touchdowns last week. Devonta Adams has really played much better down the stretch and has stepped up at wide receiver. I think this Geronimo Allison kid might be a little bit of a fantasy sleeper, might be able to make a bit of an impact here on this football game at the receiver position. And again, Dallas's defense, not entirely sold on it, but on the flip side, I know Green Bay's defense gutted through a nice performance against the Giants, but the Giants' offense was never anything great this year. The receivers were dropping footballs left and right. This is going to be a much taller order for the Green Bay defense and that injury-riddled secondary taking on Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense. I think they're going to be able to move the ball. You worry about the experience factor again. Green Bay's red hot. They're catching underdog points. I will not bet against Green Bay. If I bet this game sidewise, it's Packers plus the 4.5 or 5 or nothing for me, especially with Dallas showing vulnerability ATS late in the season on that 1-5 ATS slide. How does Dak Prescott, how does Ezekiel Elliott, how do the young players on this Dallas team respond in their first playoff game? Whereas Green Bay, they've got all the playoff experience in the world, and they're red hot. But I have some serious defensive concerns for Green Bay. I haven't bet Green Bay yet. I think I want +6 or something along those lines or higher to actually pull the trigger. I'd lean to the Packers, but the concern is that offensive line for Dallas is good. I think they might be able to push around Green Bay a little bit and make some plays. And that secondary, I don't know if I trust them to hold up this week like they did against the Giants. You're facing Des Bryant, some good weapons in that Dallas receiving game. Jason Witten, of course, great tight end. This is going to be a big challenge for Green Bay's secondary. They passed that challenge and held up last week. I think it's going to be much tougher, especially on the road now, to hold up this week on that side of the football against this Dallas team. So I lean to the Packers for sure. It's the only way I'd bet it. They're just too red hot, but I do have my concerns matchup-wise about the Packers. I think over the total is probably a lean to at 52, but the problem with betting over in Dallas games at 52 is, boy, they run a snail pace on offense. They just drain the play clock before every snap. They are very deliberate, very methodical. You're going to need high level of red zone execution, high level of offensive efficiency, because the pace ain't going to be there when Dallas has the football. You can bet on that. They're going to be taking the air out of the ball. That's the problem. It's a very high total, considering Dallas ain't going to be in any rush to snap the football. Still, I think both offenses do have an edge. I'd like to see that total creep down a little bit, but still, even at 52, I'd still have to lean over the total with Packers-Cowboys. All right, let's wrap it up. Video best bet, divisional playoff best bet for this weekend. We're going back to Pittsburgh, Kansas City. If you were with us in the wild card preview last week, I said lay the 10 with Pittsburgh. That was the video best bet last week against Miami. They got it done. I'm going to trust Pittsburgh once again to get it done for me here. Tough to bet against Kansas City. I respect the hell out of that team and Andy Reid's track record off a bye week, but I think Pittsburgh is the better team and is going to prove it here. Let's take Pittsburgh plus 1.5, rotation number 305. The Steelers at plus 1.5 against Kansas City. Kansas City does have defensive concerns. I know Justin Houston's going to be back. That's big, but they still miss Derek Johnson. I think he is right there with Houston, if not even better, a defensive player on that side of the ball than Justin Houston, not having Derek Johnson on the field. I think Pittsburgh's offense is going to be a little bit too much for Kansas City. And on the flip side, I do like the improvements on this Pittsburgh defense. Boy, it's tough again. Kansas City at home with the bye week track record that Andy Reid has. But again, sometimes you got to make a slightly stronger case to bet on a team than and betting against a very good team. And that's the case I'm making here with the Pittsburgh Steelers plus 1.5 against Kansas City. Your divisional playoff video best bet for this weekend. All right, that'll wrap it up. I'm Ian Cameron.
Do your research before you bet. Check out our ratings guide to see which books have the best ratings and sign-up bonuses. Open up several accounts. Shop for lines at sbrodds.com. Always be ahead of the game.